Hello everyone, my name is Patrick, and this is my list of my 12 favorite albums of 2018. So before we get started, there's just a couple things I want to say. First, any album that I worked on throughout the course of 2018 is ineligible for my list. And so that is why I wore my Primal Waters Primogenitor t-shirt, because Primal Waters is a really cool metal band that I worked with last year, and their album turned out so awesome that if it were eligible, it'd probably be in my top 4 or 5, or maybe even 3. Also, speaking of metal, I wanted to say that for those of you who aren't metal fans, only my numbers 12 and 11 are albums that I would consider to be heavy albums. So don't worry if you're not a metal fan. The whole list is not made up of metal bands. Also, I wanted to say that for the first time this year, I'm including some digital albums on my list because unlike in previous years, I wasn't able to purchase everything, a physical copy on CD. So some of the stuff I had to get digitally. So how this video is going to work is I'm going to talk a little bit about each album, and I'll go through and show you the artwork and the CD and the booklet because I think that that's important in terms of the overall piece of art that is an album. Also, I tried to film this video several times, and I just ended up rambling about each of the albums and the bands. So what I did was I sat down and I typed out on my computer a little basically paragraph review of each album. And so if it looks like I'm sitting here reading it to you, that's what I'm going to be doing. I have my laptop right behind the camera, and I'm going to be recording the video that way. So I apologize if I'm not sounding or looking normal, but trust me, you don't want a 45-minute video of me rambling about all this stuff. So without further ado, let's get into the list with our number 12. Number 12, Heart of a Hurricane by Beyond the Black. Beyond the Black is a symphonic metal band in the vein of Within Temptation, but mixed with the poppiness of the band Amaranth. This is their third album, and like their second album, a bit of a disappointment compared to the masterpiece that is their first album, Songs of Love and Death. But even so, the 15 songs on Heart of a Hurricane are still catchy and heavy, with enough sonic diversity from song to song that the album is impressive overall. For the most part, each song on the album follows the same structure: verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro, which can lead to the song sounding a bit samey. There is only one ballad-type song in the middle of the album, which is by far the most unique sounding of all the tracks. There aren't many symphonic elements throughout, but there are a few songs that do have big bombastic feel akin to something like Nightwish or Epica, with a full string section and some choral stuff. Overall, though, every song is fun to listen to. The choruses are all huge and filled with gang vocals, and a lot of the songs have really cool guitar solos that, while being technical and impressive, are still catchy and melodic. This album has a very pop feel to it. It almost feels like it could be on the radio, which is saying something because it's a metal album. It barely squeaks onto my list, but it deserves a spot nonetheless. Number 11, All I See Is War by Sevendust. I'm a big Sevendust fan. I have all their albums, and while I do think that there are a few that are subpar, for the most part, I really like everything that they have done, particularly their last 4 or 5 albums, which were all produced by the band themselves and had a bit of a raw feeling to them. For All I See Is War, however, which is their 11th studio album, if you can believe it, they decided to go in a different direction. With the help of a new producer, the album sounds more like something along the lines of In This Moment. The stereo image is massive. The guitars are heavy and in your face, but panned wide. The drums are very compressed when they are heavy, but have enough room to breathe during the lighter parts. The kick and snare are pushed up in the mix, which gives the songs a bit more of a radio feel, but the overall mix is still heavy. The vocals fit perfectly into their pocket, and while lead vocalist LaJean Witherspoon sounds like he always does, the drummer Morgan Rose sings a lot less on this album, which is a bit of a bummer since I like his style of yelling vocals a lot. Overall, the album has a bit more of an overcompressed feeling to it, though it's nowhere near as bad as In This Moment's last few albums. I find the songs themselves to be a bit less memorable than the band's previous few albums, and I think that the guitar riffs in particular seem to be a little bit less inspired than I would hope, and that's what gives me that feeling. At the end of the day, however, it's another Sevendust album, which I'm perfectly happy with. Number 10, I Hope You're Happy by Blue October. The production is what makes this album really special. Most of the songs are based around these slow hip-hop beats that just make you want to move and groove. The drums are huge and distorted and never go out of their way to sound like real drums. This gives the album more of an electronic feel than any of their previous albums, which usually lean towards more of a rock/folk rock sound. Alongside the electronic elements, there are some really ghosty sounding piano and acoustic guitars, which is a cool sonic juxtaposition that really makes the album sound unique. Each song has a different sound and feel to it. which is something that they toyed around with on their last album, joining the trend alongside bands like Imagine Dragons and One Republic. Also like their previous album, I Hope You're Happy has some more positive overall feelings. You can really tell that Justin is in a much better place now with his family and life in general. There are a few musical callbacks to their earlier work, which is really nice if you're a longtime fan. However, a couple of the songs seem to overstay their welcome, lasting a bit longer than feels necessary. The more exploratory use of synths is something that really excites me, and I hope that they can take what they learned from making this album and combine it with their more acoustic and quiet style from previous albums. I think it's still possible that we haven't yet heard the best album this band can make, and considering that their album Foiled is in my top albums of all time, that is saying something. Number 9, Shake the Spirit by L. King. Coming into 2018, I was so excited that we were going to be getting another new album from both Gin Wigmore and L. King. Both have a dirty, gritty voice, both have a similar blues rock sound, and both are just awesome. So in my head, I was pitting them against one another, of course. Who could make the better album? Elle King's last album, which was her debut, had such a cool vibe to it. There were a few songs that were based around banjo and mandolin, a few groovy songs, and a couple of rockers. The only thing that was wrong with it was that her vocals were mixed just a bit too loud. So I was really hoping that for this album, her vocals would sit better in the pocket. And they do. The mixing on this album is so good. The drums are huge and the bass is fat. There is an overall tape sound which permeates the whole thing, including the liberal use of tape distortion on everything, bordering on too much for one song in particular. The vocals are great, with unique and almost quirky rhythms, which can take a bit to get used to, but once they do, never leave your head. The two slow, soulful songs are the best songs on the album and feel like they're coming straight out of the 60s. But a few of the songs just have this attitude to them that really turns me off. It's hard to explain, but it's almost like having an agenda pushed on you, and it feels a little too forced. Lyrics aren't usually something that impacts my overall feeling of music, but in this case, a couple of the songs just aren't to my taste, and that's the reason this album sits at number 9, instead of being higher. Number 8, Post-Traumatic by Mike Shinoda. This is an album that's tough for me to give impressions on. It's so personal, sometimes it feels like you're listening in on a private conversation, and you should cover your ears. But I think that is exactly why Mike Shinoda released this music. It's his way of coping with the loss of Chester Bennington and his way of dealing with the confusing and I'm sure overwhelming ramifications of Chester's death. Listening to this album, you can tell that Mike Shinoda went out of his way to be reactionary, to do whatever felt right at the time and to not second-guess himself. Each song feels like a hodgepodge of ideas thrown together, but in an oddly satisfying way. It still sounds like Mike Shinoda, like the music he made with both Fort Minor and Linkin Park, but there is also something special about it. A few of the songs are rap songs with sung choruses, but a majority of the album is hip-hop beats with Shinoda singing. I always felt that the songs he sang lead on for Linkin Park were the weakest songs on those albums, but here, a full album of just him singing, you really get a sense of how he was feeling at the time. You can definitely tell his singing has improved over the years, and his performance on this album, both rapping and singing, is probably the best of his entire career. All the guest artists on this album fit in nicely and break up the songs that could otherwise become tedious. Even though this album was made under a set of terrible circumstances, I feel like it's a true treasure. Sometimes people are allowed to shine the brightest in the darkest of times, or some such equally sappy saying. But just because it's sappy doesn't mean it's not true. Number 7, Future Retrospective by Julien-K. This is a 4-disc set containing unreleased songs, demos, remixes, and live tracks. And while it's great to have 4 full discs of music, the first disc is the one that gets this album to number 7 on my list. Julien-K went through their catalog of unreleased songs, picked a full album's worth, and then spent a year reworking, re-recording, and remixing them. They completed unfinished songs and ideas, and re-recorded all of the vocals. What we ended up with is another great Julien-K album. From front to back, it's a blast to listen to. Since the songs are taken from years spanning their entire career, we get some that sound heavy, like their earlier material, some that are more poppy, like their second album, and some with a bit of an 80s retro flair, like their 2 most recent releases, California Noir Chapters 1 and 2. In the liner notes of the CDs, the band talked about how freeing it was to not have to worry about conforming to a set theme. This allowed them to take a few risks and to try some things they normally wouldn't. And I think that makes each of the songs sound unique, both sonically and thematically. And while I can appreciate an album with a set through line, what I love the most is a band that doesn't set any limitations for themselves in the studio. I don't think the band intended for this album to sound as good as it is, but boy am I glad it turned out this awesome. Number 6, Noir by V.N.V. Nation. After the slightly under-average album Transnational, the guys in V.N.V. Nation took time to compose an album consisting of only strings, piano, and Ronan Harris's vocals. That album, called Resonance, is one of the most beautiful albums I have ever heard. And now, 2 years later, V.N.V. Nation uses what they learned to create a dark, almost at times unsettling, post-apocalyptic album that runs the gamut from quiet, contemplative to an all-out barrage of intensity. The flow of the album is similar to past V.N.V. Nation albums. A slow intro that builds leading into a couple of normal-sounding songs, followed by an instrumental intermission, a few normal songs, another instrumental song, and so on and so forth. The slower instrumental songs feel longer than they need to be, but coming off the heels of Resonance, I understand why. If you have access to a string section, for goodness sakes, use them. The normal songs are the type of music we've come to expect from V.N.V. Nation. A mix of floor-to-the-floor kicks with heavy industrial synths and a generous helping of other EBM sounds. The thing that sets this album apart from past V.N.V. Nation releases is its use of reverb. Some of the sounds are much more wet, which contrasts nicely with the drier synth, bass, and drum sounds. Harris's voice has more reverb than in the past as well. It's the reverb that really gives this album a sense of dreaminess, which adds nicely to the darker tones. It's a catchy album both vocally and instrumentally, which is something that they haven't done consistently in the past. Overall, it's the heaviest album in V.N.V. Nation's catalog, and I like it that way. Number 5, Ivory by Gin Wigmore. We have a winner. In the bout between Elle King and Gin Wigmore, this year at least, Gin Wigmore comes out on top. While Elle King's album is at times hard to stomach, Ivory is a burger and fries with a vanilla shake on the side. I doubt that Gin Wigmore will ever release an album as good as her sophomore effort, Gravel and Wine, but Ivory comes close. There are brass sections, female and male background vocals, dirty guitar, some of the biggest sounding kicks and snares I've ever heard, and above all, well-written, catchy songs. This album is pure joy from front to back. The ballad in the middle is very reminiscent of songs from her last album, Blood to Bone, but the rest of the album feels much more like Gravel and Wine. Songs that feel like they could have been plucked right out of the 60s or even the 50s, but with a dirty analog sound thrown over the top of it. Jin's vocals are the best they have ever been, and the background gang vocals add a sense of nostalgia to the songs and really makes it feel like, hey, I've heard this song before. Things like background vocals are sometimes overlooked when it comes to assessing music, but this is a perfect example of how, when done right, it can take a song from good to great. There is a song on here that has a set of distorted doo-wop vocals in it, and that is a first. I've never heard that before. I love it. And as with previous albums, the last song, called Girl Gang, is a bit hokey, but man is it fun to listen to. I guarantee that at some point that song will be the theme song for a WWE Women's pay-per-view. It just has to be. Number 4, My Indigo by My Indigo. This. Okay. This was the album that gave me the biggest surprise of the year. I had no idea this album was going to be as good as it is, and man, it's awesome. My Indigo is the first solo album from Sharon Den Adel, the singer of the symphonic metal band Within Temptation. And while Within Temptation is one of the more poppy symphonic metal bands, this album is straight up pop music, with great production and a really cool sound. No metal whatsoever. All 10 tracks have mostly the same structure and sound. They start slow, some drums come in during the first chorus, and then the songs pick up towards the bridge, building to a really satisfying finish. While that might sound like a bad thing, the individual sounds used in each song are different enough that the album never gets stale. And that is my favorite part of this album, the sounds. There are subtle hints of acoustic rhythm guitar, very open-sounding synth pads, unique-sounding electronic elements, and big drum beats that all fit perfectly with Sharon's soaring vocals. The influence of some of Sharon's favorite artists, including Lana Del Rey, is obvious from a songwriting standpoint, but sonically this album strays away from sounding over tape-saturated and analog. It has nice, crisp production with lots of defined high and low end. It's just so fun to listen to, and the songs stay stuck in my head for days after listening to it. It's stronger than some of the With Them Temptation albums, and that is saying something. Number 3, Unexpected Truth Within by M.I.N.E. After having legal issues with their record labels and creative frustrations for the last decade, the former members of the synthwave band Camouflage created the new group M.I.N.E. and released this dark and satisfying album. They wanted to write with no limitations and to have total creative control. The result sounds just like the most recent Camouflage album sonically, but is on another level of brilliant. The songs are dark but groovy. Beautiful and moody melodies mix with harsh electronic elements to create a sound that is reminiscent of 90s Depeche Mode. Both electronic drums and acoustic drums feature prominently, with a few songs having little or no drums at all. The guitars are mostly subtle and not the focal point of the music, but rather used as a method of showing movement or rhythm. The vocals are dry and sit out in front of the mix. There is more of an energy on this album. It really feels like everyone put all they had into this project, and it really shows. This is probably my favorite style of music, even though I don't know exactly what to call it. Bands like Camouflage, And Mesh, and now M.I.N.E. all have this dark yet accessible feeling to them. Their music can be tongue-in-cheek at times, but also worthwhile to sit and contemplate. These bands have all been around a long time, creating this kind of music. Their longevity, experience, and maturity make them something that should not ever be overlooked. Number 2, Midnight Champion by Legend. This is a special album, and one that came so close to being my number 1. On their second album, Legend created an electronic album that rocks so hard it melts the skin right off your smiling face. Their first album felt like a progressive rock album, but made with electronic elements. There were almost no guitar or heavy parts, but still longer than average song sections, instrumental sections, and slow vocal melodies. Midnight Champion, however, feels like the album that Legend was destined to make. Every song starts off with a minimal ballad-like feel, building to the moment when the guitars and drums kick in and just absolutely destroy you. From there, the songs just pummel you to death until they are over. And I'm not talking like blast beats or anything like that. More like consistent, almost drony guitars. A slow, heavy rock beat and the catchiest vocal melodies thrown over the top. And the songs are all long. They have time to breathe, which is so nice. This is an album that is best listened to all the way through, but it's almost hard to do that since it's so massive, both in scale and sound. Every element to each song has the perfect amount of effects on it. The dry sounds hit hard and are huge, while the more reverb-drenched sounds sit in the back and create atmosphere. And have I mentioned the catchy vocal melodies? The hooks on this album are just so awesome. Nothing gets in the way of the vocals in terms of melody, but there are some really awesome synth lines that appear here and there that are just as interesting as the vocals. At the end of the day, it might require a patient ear to really appreciate it, but this is an album that I will be listening to for years, and something that I will use to show people how great music is right now. And number 1, M.I.N.E. and Spendelvivrif by Jan-Ev Ottesen. Okay, so I know that is 2 albums, and I'm cheating a little bit here. But Jan-Ev released 2 EPs in 2018, the alt-rock style music that he normally makes in M.I.N.E. and the acoustic Candlelight album Spendelvivrif. I'm going to lump them together for this list and treat them as one album, though for the record, the 8 songs on M.I.N.E. are good enough by themselves to still be my number 1 without the 7 songs from Spendelvivrif. So trying to talk about how much I love Jan-Ev is almost an impossible task for me. There has never been a music creator who has spoken more to me in such a profound way, and I don't have a single clue of what he is saying. All the songs are in Norwegian, a language that I do not speak, but the message is inconsequential to me because the music and the melody speak for themselves. From the groovy beats, to the odd guitar playing, to the infectious vocal melodies, this is absolutely perfect music. Following the release of what is, in my opinion, one of the greatest albums of all time, Artisten and Marlene, Jan-Ev went back into the studio and gave us these 2 EPs. M.I.N.E. is filled with songs that make you want to dance, sway, and sing along. There are pianos, strings, organs, synths, hip-hop beats, background vocals, guest vocalists, fantastic singing, rapping. Some of these songs bring to mind the Beatles, while others I suppose could be compared to things like Blur or the Rolling Stones. But overall, this is just Jan-Ev's style. On Spendelvivrif, the songs are mostly piano with string accompaniment and some guitars to add accent. It's beautiful in every possible way that music can be beautiful. Yanov is an artist that I treasure, and if he stopped making music altogether today, I would always consider his solo work and his work with his band Kaiser's Orchestra to be some of the most important music ever created. Please just look up Yanov, that's Janove, on YouTube and listen to anything you find. You will not be disappointed. So that is the end of my list. So I hope you guys had a fun time watching the video. Thank you if you made it all the way through to this end. I hope that some people found a few artists that they didn't know about. That's one of the reasons that I do these videos. So go check out anything if you thought it sounded interesting, if you never heard of those bands before. Maybe you'll learn to like them a lot. Also, 2019 is a special year for me. It's the 10th year now that I've been doing these lists of 12. So I plan to have a few special things planned throughout the year. I want to try to make a best albums of the last decade, and of course work on the best albums of 2019. So you have that to look forward to. In any case, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. I have all their albums, and while I do think that there are a few that are subpar, for the most part, I really like everything they have done. Particularly...
Get the CD, no?
Oh, yeah. Knocking, knocking, knocking. They should be over here. Move the mic. Everything's out of order now. Hey, there's a spider on your leg. That was the sound of her flicking that spider across the whole room. Can you hear it going? Oh. And some guitars to add accent. It's beautiful in every possible way. You are beautiful, no matter what you say. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you 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 enjoyed the video. So I hope you enjoyed the video. So I hope you enjoyed the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the video.
Okay, we have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
On the corner down there, there's billions of bugs.
Okay.
We need to spray them, because that's what's crawling all around.
Okay.
Do we have spray down here, do you know?
I don't know. Can we finish this first or not?
Well, I don't know. I just keep seeing bugs crawling across the
I don't
floor.
see a ton of them, so...
Oh, you can see in the corner.
I see that, but I don't see like a bunch right here in the immediate area.
Okay, let's move
We just
this.
got 5 to go. In any case, thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time. Goodbye.